Hi there, welcome to TutoriMane, and I'm going to be continuing the series of biology. We were in chapter 1, that is reproduction, organisms. Let's learn what were the reproduction stages, okay? So the first one is pre-fertilization events. So events that are involved in pre-fertilization events are gametogenesis and gamete transfer, okay? So let's see what this is. So gametogenesis, in that first we learn some points about sexuality. So it refers to the process of formation of the two types of gametes, that is the male and the female. Gametes are haploid cells. So gametogenesis is the process of formation of the gametes, okay? So under pre-fertilization events, mainly you have to remember two things, that is gametogenesis and gamete transfer. So first, your gametogenesis, it is the formation of the male and the female gametes. Okay, and they're telling gametes are haploid cells. What do you mean by haploid cells? So the cells that contain chromosomes in them are called haploid cells. So here, for the male and the female gametes, chromosomes must be there, right? Because when they're getting fertilized, there's a new individual formation that is going to take place, and chromosomes and DNA is a basic requirement. So here is examples of algae, that is homogametes, and this is of humans. So the male and the female gametes can either look completely similar to each other or they can look different, okay? First, here if you see in the example of algae, there is no difference between the left and the right one, right? One is the male and one is female here. But in humans, if you see, this is the egg or the ovum, okay? This is produced by female and this is the sperm that is produced by the male. So if it is same, it is known as homogametes or isogametes, and in humans it's known as heterogametes, or this is known as the sperm and the ovum. So next, in flowering plants, the unisexual male flower is staminate, and while the female is pistillate or the bearing pistils. So in flowers, in humans, we learned it's called sperms and egg, and in plants, the female part is known as pistil and the male part is known as stamen, okay? In some flowering plants, both male and female flowers may be present on the same individual or on a separate individual. So what happens in some plants, there will be flowers that are male and female both. So if they're in the same plant, the process will be easier, right? Because they're close to each other. The male does not have to travel very far. So such plants are called monoecious, okay? This is seen in coconuts. And remember the word monoecious. So if your male and female flowers are on different plants or different individuals, such type are known as dioecious. So you have your monoecious and dioecious. Dioecious example is papaya, by the way. And typical examples of bisexual animals that possess both male and female reproductive organs are basically hermaphrodites. So in plants, we call it monoecious and dioecious, and in animals also such cases are possible. Example in cockroaches, okay? So a cockroach can possess both male and female reproductive organ in just one individual. So next part is cell division. First we saw sexuality and we learned, in humans it can, either be heterogametes or homogametes, and we learned about in plants, stamen and pistil. We learned monoecious and dioecious plants, and we learned hermaphrodites. So let's see cell division. So organisms belonging to pteridophytes, gymnosperms, angiosperms, and most of the animals including human beings, the parental body is diploid. It is obvious that meiosis, the reduction division, has to occur, okay? So what happens here? What are they telling? So most of the organisms, including humans and animals, the process that takes place is meiosis, that is reduction division. You would have learned mitosis and meiosis in your 11th, right? So that is what. And in diploid organisms, specialized cells called meiocytes or the gamete mother cells undergo meiosis. At the end of the meiosis, only one set of chromosomes get incorporated into each gamete. So it's the same thing, meiosis occurs and it forms meiocytes, okay? You would have learned all of this in your class 11th. And a haploid parent produces gametes by mitotic division. Remember that. So if it is diploid, reduction division goes on, that is meiosis, and if it is haploid, mitotic division takes place. And here is basically a table which was put up in your textbook, and like some example of organisms and their total chromosome number and their chromosome number in the gamete, okay? So what happens? It gets divided into half, right? Since the male and the female is going to get fused together. Again, if you have to get back 46 chromosome like in the original, so your original must be 46. So again, when an individual is forming, if you have to get back 46, then 2, 23 and 23 cells must get combined. So one gamete always has 23. In human beings, okay, in houseflies, see, in total if they have 12, obviously if you divide it by 2, the blanks are for you to fill it. So in housefly if it's 12, if you divide it by 2, what happens? 6. So in rat if it's 21, here, so you have to double it, so it's 42 in total, okay. Similarly, there is a bigger table in your textbook, you can refer it if you want to. Then let's see gamete transfer. We saw gametogenesis until now, okay? That is the formation of the gamete. Now we'll see how they get transferred. So in a majority of organisms, male gamete is motile and the female gamete is stationary, except in few fungi and algae. So in humans, what happens? The egg or the ovum is stationary, right? It's not moving, but the sperm is moving. The sperm is traveling to where the egg is. So that is motile. Motile means it can travel on its own, or it can move from one position to the other, okay? So in majority organisms, it is like that. So the male can move and the female cannot move. But except in few fungi and algae where both male and female will be motile, okay? So both can move. So in several simple plants like algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes, water is the medium through which this gamete transfer takes place. Since this fertilization takes place outside, what happens? The water will be the medium. Since algae, bryophytes, they all exist inside water, so all these male gametes travel through the water and go reach to the female ones. So what happens? Because the medium is so huge, lots and lots of male gametes has to be produced, okay, compared to the female ones, because they can get lost and they may not reach the female gametes on time, because there will be a time duration where they will be active. So after that time they cannot fuse or they cannot reproduce. So that's why the number of male gametes that are produced are 1,000 times more than the female gametes, okay. So in seed plants, pollen grains are the carriers of male gametes and ovule has the egg. So in plants, what happens? Your pollen grains contains the male gametes, okay, which travel to where the egg is. So these pollen grains are produced in the stamen. In bisexual self-fertilizing plants, example peas, transfer of pollen grains to the stigma is relatively easy as anthers and stigma are located close to each other. So what is self-fertilizing plants? Bisexual means, I told you, one plant which has both the male and the female part. So they're so close to each other that the traveling part is so short, the male gametes can easily reach the female ones. So what happens? This pollen grains are not the male gametes, okay, remember that. They just they have the male gametes, they contain the male gametes and they move and go to the stigma. They can pass through it and go reach the ovum where they fuse together. So in dioecious plants, a specialized event called pollination facilitates transfer of pollen grains to the stigma. So what happens in dioecious plants, where this is basically where the male and the female parts are not in the same plant, okay. So if the male and the female part is not in the same plant, they will be pretty far away. So that time the pollen grains have to still be transferred somehow. That process by how it is transferred is known as pollination, okay, and it's also known as cross-pollination. There it was like self-fertilization, here it's called cross-pollination. So pollination basically is facilitated by some insects. They carry this, you will learn further on. Fertilization. So until now we learned pre-fertilization, in which we learned gametogenesis and we learned gamete transfer. We'll see what fertilization is. So the most vital event of sexual reproduction is perhaps the fusion of the gametes. That means this is the most important part, okay. Here the gametes are fusing together. This process is also called syngamy. So fertilization of syngamy is the same thing, and it forms zygote. I told you that time only, when a male and female gamete fuses, they form a zygote. Okay, and there's another term here called parthenogenesis. What is parthenogenesis? It's the reproduction from an ovum without fertilization. So sometimes your male and the female gametes, if they don't fuse, some organisms have the capability that they can reproduce just with the female part. Example is honeybee, and this concept is used in producing your seedless fruits. You must have come across in grapes, in watermelon, and fruits like that. So this process is used, okay. In most aquatic organisms, syngamy occurs in the external medium, that is water, that is outside the body of the organism. This type is known as external fertilization. We just saw, right, in plants, the medium was water. So for aquatic organisms, the fertilization occurs external, means what, outside the body of the organism. In many terrestrial organisms belonging to fungi, higher animals such as reptiles, birds, mammals, and including humans, what happens, syngamy occurs inside the body of the organism, that is internal fertilization. In humans, it occurs inside, right? The sperm basically moves through the fallopian tubes and it goes to where the egg is. So we learned what is external fertilization and internal fertilization. Now, post-fertilization. First, we'll see the formation of zygote. Okay, in organisms with external fertilization, zygote is formed in the external medium, whereas in those exhibiting internal fertilization, zygote is formed inside the body of the organism. So obviously, see, if the fusion is taking place externally, the zygote will be formed in external medium, but if it's taking place internally, it will be formed inside. In organisms belonging to fungi and algae, zygote develops a thick wall that is resistant to desiccation and damage. It undergoes a period of rest before germination. So in organisms like fungi and algae, what happens, since it will be externally, a zygote will develop a thick wall on its own, which will be so strong that nothing can harm or damage it. So it goes through a period of rest before it germinates. Okay, and embryogenesis. What is embryogenesis? So it refers to the process of development of the embryo from the zygote. I told you in the previous video also I mentioned about this. So during embryogenesis, zygote undergoes cell division and cell differentiation. So embryogenesis means what? Your embryo is developing from your zygote. So zygote undergoes two main processes, okay, that is cell division and cell differentiation. So why cell division happens? To increase the number of cells. Okay, now if your number of cells are increased, what is it called? It's called a tissue, right? So your group of cells are called tissue. And why cell differentiation occurs is, now you have your tissues and your cells. So these cells and tissues have to be converted into organs for the development of the zygote. So in oviparous animals like reptiles and birds, the fertilized eggs covered by hard calcareous shell are laid in safe place in the environment. So we know what is oviparous and viviparous, right? Oviparous animals are like reptiles and birds, like here it's shown. So they lay eggs and their offspring will grow externally. But in viviparous, what happens? The offspring is internally grown and then it is given birth. So if the egg is laid, it is covered by a calcareous shell, okay, which protects it. So because of proper embryonic care and protection, the chances of survival of young ones is greater in viviparous organisms. Okay, see, in viviparous, I told you the offspring will be grown and nurtured inside the body of the parent. So that means it has lots of protection, right? In flowering plants, the zygote is formed inside the ovule. After fertilization, the sepals, petals and the stamens of the flower wither and fall off. So in plants, what happens, like I told you, the male gametes pass through the stamen and they reach where the ovum is, and then the zygote will be formed. So after it forms, they're telling that all the petals and the sepals, they all fall off, and that is when that gets converted into a seed and the fruit grows. So the ovary develops into the fruit, which develops a thick wall called pericarp that is protective in function. So the fruits develop a thick wall called pericarp. Pericarp is just your layer of the fruit, okay? So thank you for watching with TutoriMane. This will be the end of this topic and this chapter as well. It's a very small chapter. I'm going to be continuing the further chapters in the coming videos. Thank you.